Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Glad to have this man back. As Jordan Belfort. Of course, you know him as the Wolf of Wall Street. He's now the Wolf of Investing. That's his latest book. Jordan, how are you? Good to see you again.
I'm doing great. How are you, Joe?
I'm doing very well. You were mad at me last time because I hadn't seen the movie. I went and watched the movie.
Ah!
I felt like an idiot because I'm the only person on the planet who hadn't seen it before.
I was
Wow.
like, you're the one. You're the one that hasn't watched it, right?
I was the one. No longer is there a one. Go and get his book, by the way. It's called The Wolf of Investing, and follow him at Wolf of Wall Street or Wall ST over on IG. Let me just ask you a quick thing about the movie.
Sure.
As I'm watching it, I see a guy in Leo DiCaprio playing you, and I see him playing the guy that, because I interviewed you before I watched the movie. I see him playing you very well as far as I know you. And I don't know you that well, but he looks like he does a really good job. What jumped out at me is that you're a talented guy who could have been a wild success, anything he did. Why go that route? Why do that you did when I think you could have been successful not doing that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, as they say, hindsight's 2020. It was like an accidental thing. I didn't really intend on doing it when I started. And I think if I could point to one thing in the beginning, it was probably having some really bad mentors. People that showed me a certain way of business. And it was in a very tumultuous time. It was after the crash of 87. There was a big, shakeup on Wall Street. And Wall Street, traditional Wall Street, was really closed down for a while. There was nothing happening. And I fell into this area of the market and then met a couple of people. And that was the start of it. But, if you want to look at it technically, what really happened was that my ability to sell and teach others to sell stock to investors was outstripping my ability to create great companies to take public. So I had an imbalance of sales versus, essentially like in any business, there's a product you're selling and then your ability to sell it. My ability to sell product outstripped my ability to create product. And that caused a problem. The companies were not as good as they should have been. Some of them became big companies and had some big successes, but that led to a sort of what became stock manipulation, because I was outstripped. The demand was more than the supply. And then I got greedy, frankly. And, you get high in your own supply. And the first time you cross over the ethical line, it's like a little step, then you're like, I'll be a pillar after that. But once you start on that road, it's one step, next step. And that was really how it happened. And then the drugs didn't really help anything with my moral compass. And, but, if I wouldn't have done 98% of what I did was legal. It was this little bit I was doing where I was, taking companies public and holding units back in friends' accounts, and they call that free riding. And by the way, happens all over Wall Street. The biggest firms doesn't make it right. I'm not trying to say what I did was wasn't wrong because others did it, but hey, I was big and got caught, and it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened because it created this whole new life for me now. I didn't think that at the time, of course. Right. But it, that to me was like the one time in my life I got in trouble. And, I think I learned a lot from that and became a better person. And I serve as a redemption story for other people. And I think people love that. The Americans.
You're also the go-to guy. I mean, I do a show, and immediately when I saw what Trump was going through, I said, you got to get Jordan Belfort back on. So you are a mentor now, and I love that you've admitted the wrongdoings before, and you're not trying to make any excuses for it, but now you're a guy who can be the mentor for the mentees that you didn't get.
I think that's really one of the reasons why Sam Bankman-Fried today got such a long sentence. Is like he remains completely unrepentant, in denial, lying on the stand, and judge is not going to look at that very, very kindly when he's doling out a sentence. He probably had his mind made up before mostly, but he was unrepentant the whole way through, and it's pretty obvious what happened. More than it's very obvious what happened, and so I think a big part of mine was taking responsibility and then just doing it right. Since then, just really giving massive value to people, and it's created an amazing life.
His new book is called The Wolf of Investing. Go and get that. As I'm watching the movie, I kept thinking to myself, this can't really be true. How much of that movie was true? What was the vast majority? I know that it's based on your book, but I know there were some scenes that you say never really happened. But how much of that was true?
Very few. 95% was true.
Really?
In some ways, we were much more wild than the movie because the things they couldn't show would have been X-rated, right? Or NC-17. But, I mean, I think the things that weren't true mostly were about like characters that would collapse. So you might have like one character that represented four different people, their actions. And then sort of the timeline was juggled. And that's because you have 3 hours for a lifetime, someone's lifetime or half a life, right? So I
Yeah.
think Scorsese did an amazing job at doing that and making it very watchable. So it moved the story forward very quickly and made it very engaging. And I think the proof is in now, how people love the movie to this very day.
It is Jordan Belfort. Go to at Wolf of Wall ST over on Instagram. I follow you. You don't follow me. Whatever, Jordan. You know what I mean?
Oh, I'll follow you. I just don't. I'm terrible when it comes to Instagram.
No,
Like
it's all
I'm
good.
going to tell you, I'm not good at it. So I'll make sure my team follows you.
Oh, I
Promise.
appreciate that. It's at Joe Talk Show. So as I'm watching the movie again, I'm thinking to myself, how did he do anything different than what the United States government does? And here's what I mean. The pump and dump, they do that all the time. You've got people in government that will go on the House floor or on the Senate floor and talk about some industry, and secretly they're buying stock in an industry that will benefit by what they're saying. So how is it different what you did from what they do every day?
Well, I mean, it's fundamentally, it is different in terms of similar, but there are some differences. But here's the thing. I think what shocks most people is that, like, how could this not be legislated against?
Right.
It's very easy to stop this insanity, and that is pass a law that no one in Congress or House of Representatives or Senate can, or their families or their employees, direct
Right.
employees, can trade while they're a representative. It's just ridiculous because they do
Easy.
have access, right? But yet they'll never pass that because they make so much money. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is the queen of that, and she's more successful than Warren Buffett. How? Because she's smarter or has better investor acumen? I don't think so, right? She
No.
obviously has access to information before the public does, and yeah, that's more insider trading more than what I was doing. So they have possession of non-public information, and they take positions in these stocks. So it's a travesty, and it really needs to be corrected. But I'm not holding my breath for it to be corrected.
Well, when I say pump and dump, and maybe you can explain it better than I can, that means that you as a company would come out and say, this is an unbelievable product or stock or thing or whatever it is that we're trading. You got to go and get it. You got to go and get it. Everybody goes and gets it. Then you sell high, and they all lose all their money. I mean, that's what that sort of is. It was artificially pumping something up that might not have been
Right.
as good as it was, right?
Correct. So that's why in their case, it's not so much that these companies aren't good. They are great companies. So, but they just know that they're great before anyone else. They know that they're greater, like they're on the way to greatness. And then suddenly, they get some inside information on some new laws that we passed or some
Right.
grants that'll be given out, and that are going to be very beneficial to the company. And they buy early. So it's really trading on inside information because it's not widely disseminated yet, or not disseminated at all. So that's the difference between the two. But it's equally illegal, and it should be statutorily prohibited.
Well, of course, you've got the Speaker of the House is the one that brings the bills to the floor. And if she's bringing bills to the floor that benefit, let's say, a windmill company, guess what? She's buying windmill stock. That tells you something. Is Jordan
Exactly.
Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street? Of course, he's the guy. He's now got a book out called The Wolf of Investing. I want to ask you about Trump and Mar-a-Lago. I've been to Mar-a-Lago several times. I played the national anthem on my saxophone last November for a movie premiere. It's a beautiful place. I grew up in Palm Beach County. You always know about Mar-a-Lago.
Beautiful.
That room where I played the national anthem is worth probably $50 million by itself. So when some idiot in New York says it's worth $18 million for an estate where the property next door, they're selling 2 acres for $200 million today on Zillow, when they say something that stupid, then they can prosecute somebody and charge him with fraud or in a civil way, get $450 million out of the guy. What did you think when you saw all this going down? This is just politics, right?
It's politics beyond that. I mean, like, not only is it politics, but it's destructive to the New York real estate market. I mean, who's going to want to invest their money in New York when they don't like you, you're on the wrong side of the political spectrum, or you just piss off the wrong person, and they weaponize these laws that are ridiculous. The law was not created for this type of situation. It was for, like, fraud against the consumer at a very small level.
Right.
Like, there was no victim here. There was no fraud. Listen, real estate, this is how it works. Like, the owner of the real estate gives what they believe to be the highest, most beneficial value. They value it up to the highest end of the spectrum
Of
based
course.
on what they believe. And in Trump's case, he's got a brand that adds more cachet to his property. So who knows what they're worth? They're worth whatever someone else is willing to pay for them. I remember, in fact, when he had some property that he sold to, like, someone in the Middle East for, like, some extraordinary amount of money because he was attached to it. So, like,
Right.
it was far beyond people would think was the intrinsic value. So who's to say? But listen, to say it was worth $18 million, that was like the tax assessment from how many years ago, if it's worth at least $500 million, and
At
probably
least.
a lot more than that. So it was just completely ridiculous, and there was no jury involved. The only savings grace here is that at least the appellate court did reduce the judgment to a reasonable. They should have reduced it to zero, but they
Right.
reduced it to a more reasonable level. He's going to win an appeal. If not there, he'll win at the Supreme Court, because the whole thing is prima facie nonsense. It's
Yes.
nonsensical. There was no victims. The banks loved him. They wanted to do business in the future. He did nothing wrong. Nothing that every other real estate broker, and by the way, does. And they didn't even rely on it, Deutsche Bank. They call in their own appraisers and they
Right.
make their own judgment. And even at the bottom of his financial statement, it says you shouldn't rely on these financial statements, in our opinion. It's the whole thing's idiotic and ridiculous. So yeah, it's a complete weaponization of the system of justice. And it's not only there; he's facing it all over the place. So Biden has records in his garage. He gets, an investigation and a slap on the wrist, meaning nothing but saying, "Don't do it again. You're too old," right, and too
Yeah, he's too old.
senile,
Yeah.
right? And Trump gets indicted. Okay,
It's
like
stunning.
Stacey Abrams is out there in Georgia denying the results of an election, doing everything she can to try to get it overturned. What does she get? Applause from everybody. Yeah, Stacey, you're the best. Trump indicted. The whole thing is nonsense. So
Yeah, it is.
and Alvin Bragg. I mean, look at that one. So that's a great one, where like everybody else looked at the case and turned it down. The Federal Election Commission, the U.S. Attorney, and like he has bootstrapped. He bootstraps like two things together and tries to create a felony when none existed. And Trump is now in court for that, right? And starting April 15th. And it's
Right.
really just a process to keep him busy so he can't be campaigning.
Yeah, it broke up. It broke up again a little bit, but I got what you're saying. Alvin Bragg's case is a 37 count indictment, and when you ask Alvin Bragg, what are the charges, he says, "I don't have to tell you that." But it turns out he's connecting these charges to something federally when the FEC itself already said Trump did nothing wrong. Alvin Bragg has no case, but you nailed it. He just wants him in court because then he can't rally, then he can't campaign, then he can't get out there and continue to win in the polls. Go get the book. It's called The Wolf of Investing. Also, we're going to talk about Truth Social in a minute. It's Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street, obviously. When it comes to that case, you nailed it as well. These banks, in the actual contract from the Trump organization, were told, go and get your own assessment. Go and get your own valuation. Don't take my word for it. I think my property's worth $1 trillion. Doesn't matter what he says. They go out, they do their due diligence, they all make millions of dollars on the loans, and he somehow faces a civil penalty of $500 million. I mean, that's basically what it is, right? These banks, it was up to them to decide if the collateral made sense.
Correct. I mean, this is going to get overturned. There's no doubt about it. It's just this judge is like a laughing stock. He's been overturned 5 times already. He's completely just a Democratic operative. And
Right.
Letitia James campaigned on, "I'm going to get Trump." She says it publicly. It's like I can't even believe that this is going on in the country I grew up in the country that I love. It's complete perversion of the justice system, really.
His book, The Wolf of Investing, provides investment tips and insights for anybody, even somebody without a financial background that can follow and benefit from. Go and get that book right now, The Wolf of Investing. It's Jordan Belfort. So Trump faces $500 million in penalties. It's lowered down to $175 million, which just basically gets him to go to appeal. If he doesn't put that bond up, he can't even go to appeal. And they start taking away Trump Tower and Mar-a-Lago. So and now we're in that situation where the appeals court gets it. The appeals court in New York is the highest court. It'll end up in the Supreme Court of the United States, and you're right. This goes against the Eighth Amendment. But what about Truth Social? He pulls this card out of his sleeve and goes public with that. At one point, it looked like he gained $7 billion in a day. I think it ends up being $3 or $4 billion. But is that what you would have done in the same situation? I didn't see Truth being valued that high, but wow, amazing.
Yeah. I got to tell you, this is great. You know what I love about this so much is that the whole establishment, right, whether it's big tech, Democratic Party, they all colluded basically to throw him off social media, to try to destroy him. And they have all these cases they're trying to bankrupt him and just make him, so unappealing as a human being that he can never get elected again. He'll end up being broke, under a bridge, being peed on by dogs, right? A bunch of rabid dogs, right? And yet, by throwing him off social media, he had no choice but to start his own platform and he ended up, I think he's up by $5 billion now, right? So as a result of what they did, they
Right.
put $5 billion, which now he's richer than he's ever been in his entire life by like double
Right.
because of what they tried to do to him. It's freaking the best. It's like you can't even like wish for better for this guy. You know, and listen, I'm
Right.
obviously a fan of Trump. I don't love everything he says, but I'm a fan. Okay, I think he did a great job as president. I'd vote for him again without thinking twice about it. But it's just such like it's so sweet to see this happen on the day, and they're talking and Biden's calling them broke Don, and then he made $3.5 billion on the same day. It's great.
I love it.
It's great.
It is Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street. Get the book called The Wolf of Investing. It's out right now. Before I let you go, I've got less than a minute, Jordan, but I wanted to make sure that I asked you this. I feel like you and I are similar guys in our drive to succeed. A-type personalities, alpha males, people that don't take no for an answer. And again, you've already admitted that you did some wrongdoing, but I think that in your life now, you're a straight and narrow guy who I think can be a mentor to others. Just if you don't mind, give me a few seconds of advice to those that are watching and listening that are beaten down every day, that they can't succeed, they can't get out of the doldrums, they can't ever get to that point that they once dreamed they could. I think that society purposely is trying to hold people down.
Yeah. Well, I think the key is to remember this, that your past does not equal your future unless you choose to live in the past. And a lot of people end up living in the past. They've made mistakes. Sometimes it's their own fault. Sometimes they just were in the wrong place at the wrong time. But they start to look at themselves as, what they've accomplished in the past, that somehow maybe some failures they had, they never really got ahead in life. Now their fate is sealed. And nothing could be further than from the truth. Your life in the future does not have to equal your past if you choose not to live in the past. In other words, in truth, your past mistakes make you stronger. You grow, you learn from your failures far more than you learn from your successes. So if you're willing to embrace the lessons of the past and put one foot in front of it, and also work really, really hard, by the way, it requires massive hard work, and also to learn whatever specialized skill you need to learn to achieve what you want to achieve. A lot of people make the mistakes. They try to achieve something, but they don't take the time to really learn, or at least get partially competent in what they're trying to do. So, if you're willing to work really hard, put one foot in front of the other, I don't care how low you fall in on the totem pole of life, of love, of relationships, doesn't matter. I did it. Anyone can do it. You put one foot in front of it, work really hard, and you can get anything you want in life. It is never too late, especially now. There's massive opportunity everywhere. So if you're feeling like you're in the doldrums, honestly, there's never been a better time to get ahead in life. But you got to be willing to do the hard work, put one foot in front of the other, and look at the future and not the past.
I love it. It's Jordan Belfort, The Wolf of Wall Street. Also, The Wolf of Investing is the new book. Do me a favor and come back again soon, my man. Thanks for making time today.
Take care.
All right, brother. We're back after this. Stay right here.